standing on already established protocol, my dear friends, greetings once more to all of you. As you well know, I stand here representing primarily the bishops of the ecclesiastical province of Onitsha, who are the proprietors of the seminary. But I also represent, on this august occasion, the affiliating university, Pontifical Urbaniana University, whose emeritus professor of philosophy I am. And having retired from the university as vice rector, my presence in this 394-year-old university, my presence in this convocation ceremony is also an establishment of a direct link with the Urbaniana. And I always do that with a lot of joy and pride, and that is why I always don the academic gown of the vice rector, which I retired with as an emeritus professor. And I'm so happy with the messages I've heard so far, beginning with the interaction with the seminary family yesterday and our joyous celebration of the Eucharist this morning, to the brilliant and thought-provoking academic paper by Professor Nicholas Akwanya, who, in case you don't know, is a member of my diocesan presbyterial council, the Senate of the Bishop. And finally, to this valedictory speech by the best graduating student who is absent but who was able to send his text, as well as also the introductory remarks before the presentation of the candidates by the head of Department of Theology. It has been a very happy and joyous occasion, and I thank in a very special way the acting rector and the seminary community for the warm reception accorded me. I thank my teacher, Father P.D. Abnono. When I arrived, he kidnapped me. And for 2 hours, when we are busy negotiating my release, and the only condition on which he released me was that the bishops would agree to pay the ransom of the important points he raised about moving our seminaries forward. Nothing disturbs Father P.D.'s sleep now than the quality of priests that we produce in our province. He feels we are doing well, but is convinced we can do a lot better. And I agree with him. Father Akwanya, in the 8 years that I've been outside the classroom and the library, I have never felt so nostalgic for the classroom environment and the library as you made me feel this mid-morning by your lecture. I was expecting something that would have to do with the use of English as a powerful tool of communication of the gospel in our environment, given also that the English of our modern priests is deteriorating in a very alarming rate. But he offered something more fundamental and more important than the use of English. Thwarting of the language of discourse, of presentation of the message. 2 years ago, I dwelt on the harm that Pentecostalism is doing to Christianity in Nigeria, and in a special way to the Catholic Church. Mine was just a message, not even an academic paper. And without having listened to my message, the academic paper lecturer on that day, I think she was the Commissioner for Education, another professor, a devout Catholic, repeated exactly the same things. Then last year, at the Bigad Memorial Seminary in Enugu, at the Convocation, I said similar things, delivering a similar message. And today, however, using the repertoire of philosophers and literary giants, you have placed all this discourse within a religious and literary context that perhaps we were not able to do in our previous discussions. I thank you, Father. I know those of you who graduated from philosophy only about 4 or 5 years ago will not be able to repeat the central message of Jürgen Habermas, whom Father, after over 40 years of study of philosophy, or 30, was able to use effectively. If I ask you anything about Karl Marx, you may only remember the most ephemeral of his affirmations. And yet he was able to dip in the ocean of the profundity of Marxist thoughts, and especially also to reveal its weaknesses. But Father said something that is relevant to this seminary and all our seminaries, and that is, having presented to us what ideologies do to our thought processes and our language, he said that theology should do what ideology does in processing. But am I right? In processing the data and the information we receive from so many other sources, including Pentecostalism and our traditional religion, in order that our theological and pastoral discourses will retain its Orthodox Catholic character. And in saying that, he also taught me something. I had been saying in my conferences that traditional religion is the foundation of all religions, and no religion will establish its autonomy until it has replaced traditional religion. Now I have learned it is not traditional religion, but primitive religion. And there is a great difference between traditional religion and primitive religion, because the Igbo traditional religion of today is no longer the same with the primitive religion of the Igbos, because that one was less organized. Father, thank you. Now, my message. Agbambo otuonogwe. Agba ibua otuonogwe. Ajuo agba ito otuonogwe. Ajuo onabuzi ogwe ka apitara gana ako. All the discussions now, all the concerns now are centering on the harm that Pentecostalism is doing to Christianity. And I did affirm last year that present-day prosperity Pentecostal gospel in Nigeria is more dangerous to Christianity than fundamentalist Islam. Because whereas fundamentalist Islam could strengthen Christians by persecution, Pentecostalism is destroying Christianity from its root by nibbling at the basis of our faith. The bishops are saying the same things. Your lecturers are saying the same things. Many worried Catholics are saying the same things out there. Now I ask, where is the problem? I feel very sincerely that we have to reflect on the quality of communication within the church in a digital era. The quality of communication inside the church. I am not thinking of communicating the gospel to others, because we have now very many experts in digital communication of the gospel among at least the younger generation of priests. My worry is whether inside the church we are communicating enough with one another. We know that one of the basic functions of language is communication. And I will always insist that in communication, the most important thing is not what you say, but what the other understands you to have said. What are the seminarians understanding their teachers as having said in the lectures they give in theology? What are the teachers understanding the seminarians as having said in their responses and their practical behavior? What, for instance, is this seminary community understanding, and the bishops themselves, understanding 70-something graduates as saying in being absent in today's graduation ceremony, as important as it is? What are the bishops understanding the priests as saying in their responses to the directives from the bishops? Before we even ask, what are we saying? I will give a few examples. One of the early challenges we faced in seminary formation in the last 15 years was how to react to the pressure that was coming from modern means of mass and social communication, the smartphone. And our seminarians, like all young people, had problems dealing with that reality. And because they had problems dealing with the reality, they used it badly. I am afraid we did not understand what they were saying by their misuse of smartphones. Our response was to slam a ban on the use of smartphones. And at the end, to show that the seminarians themselves did not even understand what we bishops were communicating by the ban, we now have priests who are so dependent on the smartphone that they respond to telephone calls during Mass, during the celebration of the Sacrament of Penance. And if they are in a concelebration and they are not the principal celebrant, they spend the time during homily and offertory collection browsing and chatting on their smartphones. Yes, we have them. And what are those priests telling us about our approach to that kind of problem? it is revealing that the best class ever, at least theoretically, we are to see whether they will be practical in the field. But the best class ever produced in this seminary, we are the first set ever to hold many of their lectures online under the lockdown imposed by COVID-19 pandemic, and having to learn how to profitably use what they were not permitted to use in the first place. And now the product of that experience has made perhaps the bishops listen differently and review their position on the use of smartphones. This is one example. Very often, bishops give directives to priests, and what you hear is, "Yes, my Lord," or in my own case, "Yes, Father Bishop." But has the priest really understood what directive the bishop gave, or does he even care to understand? Very often it is presumed that we are understanding what the other person is saying because not sufficient effort is made to listen and to explain oneself in case there is a doubt about comprehension. What are our ex-seminarians saying by their reaction to the church and to their alma mater? My invitation is that in our formation system now, we have to pay special attention to communication at different levels in the church. I know the church is hierarchical, but I also know that Igbo culture is patriarchal. Is the hierarchical structure of the church an obstacle to communication within our context in Nigeria? What help can our patriarchal culture offer in addressing the stumbling blocks that a hierarchical structure may present? You know, my training is philosophy, and we raise more questions than we have answers to offer. I'm raising these questions that I believe that theologians can address, and maybe not only theologians. I always remind people, the canon lawyers here among us will agree with me, that the code of canon law was developed within a cultural context that is feudal, running a feudal monarchical structure, and applying it to a context like a country and the Igbo land, where you can't give an adult orders if you are not his father. Otherwise, aga akpa ya akpa. Maka na ụka akpara akpa ka eji isi ekwe. Nke na father akpara anything, isi ya ikwere m nkwa obedience and respect. Ọ sị gị yes, ọ pụọ mebe nke sọrọ ya. Maka na gị na ya akpara ya. If the Universal Church proposes now a review, a reform, an update of the Code of Canon Law, what are we bringing to the table based on our own experience of that code? And how does our own experience of communication influence what we bring to the table? So, my dear friends, this would be my own message. There is a lot happening in Nigeria and around us now. And many of the things are rebellions or reactions to negative impulses. And rather than just react to the reactions, it may be important first to listen and to understand as a first step to improving communication. Otherwise, we find ourselves in a system, in a situation where people who should be talking to us and with us prefer rather to address others in the hope that we will pick up what they are saying. That explains why some priests have opened websites in which they criticize their bishops rather than talking the thing out with the bishops directly. I always tell priests that it is a sign of insanity when a man discusses his problems with his father or gives messages to his father through the town crier. You are living with your father and there is an issue you want to discuss. You can't draw his attention to it. You go to the town crier and he will announce it to the whole world. You need to have your head examined. But perhaps also the father may also need to have his head examined. What has he done to his son that makes it impossible for him to raise topics for discussion on a level that would improve communication? I thank you and I thank the graduates. Before this ceremony, you wear the graduating class or the graduands. Now you are graduates. Graduates of Catholic theology. Anything you do as a priest, be honest with yourself. Ask yourself from where you learned that thing. From this seminary or from elsewhere. There are so many sources of information, so many sources of influence. But Father Akwanya today has taught us that your theological formation must have helped you in processing those sources of information and all the information thus received in order to make them coherent with your Catholic formation and the truth of the gospel. I thank you all for your attention and I wish you the best of luck.
We thank His Lordship, Most Reverend Godfrey Onah, the Catholic Bishop of Nsukka, for his special message.